Hello and welcome back to the channel. So in this video we continue our to-do clean architecture series, and in the previous video we talked about GetX and how we can use it to manage our state. And as I said earlier, when it comes to this architecture, state management is just a choice. You have to understand the concept, and from then you can use any state management you want. So I learned about how to inject our controller and how we can build a simple counter with it. So in this video you can see I have some UIs here that we'll be playing with. All that I've done is in the body of my app I have a list view builder which is returning a list style, and then I have this title and description, and the trailing has this delete button. And also in the floating action button, when I tap on it, I'm showing a modal which has two forms within it. So I have a form key which is connected to a form, and then a column which has two text form fields. So one will be for our title and the other one will be for our description, and a button that says add. So when I tap on this, I should see a form. I should see a form that has a title and a description, and a button that is asking us to add this to do. So this UI is just for demonstration. You may have a very complex UI, or depending on use case, you may even have a different design, right? But we just want to use this for example. So what we are going to do is in this particular video we are going to look at how to call our use case and then display the results. So back in our controller, we have our title controller and description controller that is going to give us access to this text that's entered here. So let's just create a method that will make us submit. So it has to be future, and for now we are not going to return anything. Let's call it add to do. It has to be asynchronous as well. So for now we just want to print the values within our title controller and then description controller. So we can just print it straightforward like this. Title is and now we are going to add this to do. So we are going to call this add to do function when we click on the add button in our bottom sheet. So this, so back in our home page, because we are doing everything in our home page and we are not routing, if the form is valid, we save the form state, right? And we can, let's just forget about saving the form state for now. We can just call our add to do. So controller dot add to do. We don't have to pass in anything because we can already access the values within the controller. And then we also have to pop the bottom sheet, so we have to close it. So over here, when I open my run window or terminal and I try to add it to do, and I hit an add, you don't see anything for now. And let's find out why it might not be working. So controller that add to do, or let's hot restart the app to see if it fixes. So let's try again. So let's try again and let's see. So I'm going to tap on the art and let's look for the title is in the console. So if I tap on add, realize that we have title is to do text and description is ha. So it was actually printing at first, but the console was populated, so I couldn't find it. Now this is what we have. We're able to get both the text and then the description. Now we have to call our use case, right? So how do you call the use cases? The use cases must be passed to this particular controller. So if you're using Riverpod provider or whatever the state management solution you are using, your controller, which is responsible for calling your use cases, must have access to the use case class. And there are so many ways you can do it. One of them is to pass it through the constructor. So I'm going to have my use case over here. So add to do use case, and I'm going to call it add to do use case, and also have to require this in the constructor. So let me make it a name constructor. Now in this particular case, we can call our add to do use case, right? So when the person taps on the button, instead of just calling add to do, which prints the text and then the description, we can call our add to do use case. So let's create a variable called results, which is the results that the add to do use case will return, and set it to await add to do use case. And this add to do use case expects something to be passing. So one positional argument, and that's the params, right? So look at the add to do use case. Realize that it's expecting the core method is expecting the params, and you can do it add to do use case dot call like this, which takes in a param, or you can just call it like a normal method. So it's the same, either doing add to do use case dot call or just calling the add to do use case method. So that's the benefit of using the name call for the method, I mean the function that we are calling. So we need a params, and the data that params takes is a to do. So we are just going to create a to do, and every to do must have an ID, a text, and a description, right? So for now I'm just come to use an ID of 1, and it must be a string, so 1, and then the text is going to be our title controller dot text dot trim, and also our description is going to be our description controller dot text dot trim, right? And right, so this is going to be our results, and our results is either going to be a failure or a to do, because we said that when we add a to do and it's successful, we want to return the to do we added. That's because of how we defined our repository. Or if it results in an error, we want to return that error. So how do we know if our addition was successful or not? So in the results, we can call a special method called fold, and this method will return us both the left side and the right side based on what actually happened. So I'm going to convert this into a normal function instead of anonymous function. So the L side, which is the left side, is the failure. So we can rename this parameter to failure and then call this a to do, because we know when it is successful we're going to get a to do back. So if it is a failure, we can show a snack bar, or we can do whatever we want to do. Now, based on your implementation, or if you are not using GetX and you are using a different state management solution, we want to return this whole header outside of your controller so that you'll be able to show a snack bar in your UI. There are so many ways you can do this. Either you return the whole value outside your method, or you handle it within the method, and that will depend on which state management you are using and how you approach issues like this or problems like this. So for instance, for now I'm stating that this method returns nothing, which means anything that happens within the method, I have to handle it within the method. I can't return the results out. So after this example, I'll show you another one which you can return the results. So result the food, if it's a failure, I want to show a snack bar, right? So I can do something like get the snack bar, which is a special snack bar in GetX. So error, and then the message is going to be failure.message, because you know that all our failures have message property on it. And if it's a to do, you just want to show something like another snack bar with the title as success and the message to be to do added successfully. Right now, this is a way of handling whatever happens within the method itself. So in other case, you might pass your context to the method so that you'll be able to show your snack bar or whatever error message you want to do. Either you want to navigate, depending on whatever you want to do, you can do it within the method. So that's one instance. Other instances, you may want to handle whatever happens back in your UI. So with that one, I'm going to duplicate this. How to do example 2, yeah, something like this. So in this example, instead of returning a future of void, you can return the results, right? So either you are going to return a failure or a to do. So I can just copy this type, right, and paste it here. And we have to import our header and our failure as well. So let me import that. So, and now we are going to return just the results. So going to return the results like this. And now in this particular instance, when we come to our home, instead of calling controller.add-to-do, we are going to call controller.add-to-do example 2. Now realize that this is going to return us another result. So our result is going to be either a future of either a failure or a to do. So it means this function must be an asynchronous in order to await this, right? So this is going to give us the actual either failure or to do. Now over here we can check which type of it, which type is the result. So we can do the same thing we did previously, results.fold, and then we have our left side and our right side, and we can only have one at a time. We can't have both left side or right side. So this is more like an if statement check. So when it is a left side, you know that's an error, right? So we can just use the built-in scaffold messenger dot off context, and then we can show our snack bar. So that's if it was an error. And if it was successful, we can still show our snack bar or do whatever navigation you want to do, right? So otherwise we can show we can show a hooray text over here, right? And we've brought the whole resource outside our controller to handle it in our UI. In other cases, as I said earlier, you may pass in your context to this function so that you can do your handling in your controller. So if you want to show your snack bar or whatever you want to do, so you just have to know which one will be good for your team, and then you use it, right? So if you're using GetX, it's much easier. So I just have to go back and call controller.add to do and delete this example. So if you're using GetX, you can just show the snack bar and then show whatever you want to show. If you want to do navigation, you can also do your get.to or get.to name navigation here, right? So that you wouldn't have to bring the results outside. But it all comes down to personal preference and the type of state management solution you're using, and which way will be very good for you. Now I realize that we have an error here. So the error is that whenever we are instantiating this to-do controller, we need to pass in our add to-do use cases, right? So when you come to the home, realize you have an error over here because we need our add to-do use case passed in. So when you pass in our add to do use case, you also have to pass in our repository. So this is where we do our dependency injection. Now you may use a package like GetIt for the dependency injection, right? Or service locating for locating your use cases, injecting your use cases, those kind of stuff. If you are using GetX, GetX has a dependency injection system built into it directly, right? So we don't need to rely on an external package. But then if you want to also use an external package, no problem. So instead of just having our controller over here, I'm going to change this stateless widget to a get view and then passing out to do controller. Now we can make this back to const, and this will be injected. So I would have to run our app again, but this will be injected when our home page gets created, right? But then how do we inject this to do controller? So there is a way of doing it, and that is to create something we call binding. So the binding is the dependency injection, which is we are injecting just this class, right, into the page. So whenever the page loads, it already has access to this class, and it's also going to be referred to as by controller. So when you do get view and you pass in a controller, you can access that controller by using the controller keyword. So you realize we still don't have any error over here, despite the fact that we don't have any variable called controller here. So in our features to do presentation, we just have a controller in pages. We can add another directory called bindings, and if you are using a different approach or a different state management, this is where you do your dependency injection. So for instance, if you are using GetIt, this will be where you'll be initializing your services, right? So the special service for this particular feature. And in this file, I'm going to create a new .dat file in this directory called to do binding, and so let's name this binding a to do binding, and then in the dependencies, this is where you inject your controller. So I'm going to inject my to do controller. Now we still need to pass in the add to do use case. So instead of just passing the add to do use case, we're going to do something called get.find. Right. So what we are telling GetX is that we've injected this add to do use case somewhere, and this what you do for other service locator packages like GetIt. So you are telling GetIt, if it's GetIt, maybe you do SL service locator, you just call it, and that is going to find where this add to do use case has been injected in the whole app. So for now, we haven't injected the add to do use case. So when we call get.find, it's going to return an error telling us that it couldn't find any add to do use case. So we have to just duplicate this, and instead of putting a to do control again, we are going to put add to do use case like this. And now the add to do use case expects something else. It expects our repository to be passed in, right? So right, that it's expecting a to do repository to be passing. So we have to also tell it that don't worry, we've passed our to do repository. Right. We have passed our to do repository within it, so just go and find it. Now we haven't passed our to do repository yet, so this is also going to throw an error. So we have to duplicate again and then inject our to do repository. So to do repository. But then when you try injecting the actual to do repository, that is going to throw an error because the to do repository is an abstract class. So we need to inject the implementation instead. So you just have to call to do repository implementation. But then when we inject the to do repository implementation, this to do repository implementation is expecting something to be passed in. So it's expecting a remote database to be passed in. Now we also tell GetX that we've injected a remote database somewhere. So let's go and find it. But then we haven't injected a remote database. So we have to duplicate this once more and then inject our remote database. So to do remote database, and in this case we have to also inject the implementation because we can't instantiate abstract classes. And now this is the final step because the remote database, which is our database, does not depend on anything. Our data layer does not depend on anything, right? Now this is how you do your dependency injection. So with GetIt, if you are using GetIt for dependency injection, you are still going to inject these stuff like I have done here, right? So you must inject your database, you must inject your repository, you must inject your use case, and if you are using a block or whatever state management solution you are using, if it is required to be injected, you have to inject that one as well. Now the to do repository implementation, we injected the implementation, not the actual to do repository, right? So when we ask the to do use case GetX to find our to do repository, is going to find the class which has the to do repository itself, right? So in order to help it so that we don't have an error, we can type this injection. Let's just run the app first, and run the app also throw an error because after just creating this binding, we are not using this binding anywhere in our app. Right now, in order to use this binding, we have to tell GetX that when we go to a particular page, we're going to call this binding, which will inject all these dependencies, right? And GetX will manage these dependencies for us. So when we are out of that page, it's delete all these dependencies. When we go to that page, it injects them back. Now we have just one page, so the only place we can do this injection is in our main.dat file. So back in our main.dat file, we have to change this material app to a get material app, right? Just for GetX. So get material app, and that's a version of the same material app which GetX had added the functionality to. And now over here, since we have just one page, we can call binding over here initial binding, right? And then call our binding, so home binding, and no, to do binding, so to do binding like this. And this binding will be injected whenever we come to the initial route, right? So how do we then know the initial route? So initial route is slash, which is the starting of the page. Now the starting of the page, which is just a forward slash, doesn't point to any page. Like the home is a whole different thing from our initial route, which we are saying is a slash. So we have to come to get pages, and these are going to be our pages, right? Mostly we do this in a different file, but then in this short example I'm just doing everything here. And if you are confused with the usage of GetX, don't worry, in the coming videos I will look at how to do this without any state management at all, so with that you wouldn't have to follow GetX or be confused with GetX way of doing stuff. So I'm going to create a new page, so get page, right? And then the name is going to be forward slash, and then the page and now again we can put our binding here instead of the initial binding. So if you have a lot of pages and you don't want the initial binding to be your to-do binding, you can just put the binding directly here. So we have our to-do binding here like this, and that means whenever we go to this page, inject this particular whenever we go to this route, inject this particular page, and these are the dependencies for this particular page, right? So we don't need the home again, and we can either remove the initial binding as well, because whenever we come to this page, this is automatically going to inject the to-do binding. So if you have more pages like slash edit, right, we can have our edit page here, and then we can have a method or a binding that is going to inject all the dependencies that our edit page depends on, right? So for now we just have one page, so this should be okay. This setup should be okay for us. Now let's run the app and see what we have. Let's just test if everything works. So back in our controller, let's comment out whatever this add to do, or yeah, let's comment out whatever this add to do is doing for now, and just print injected. So I'm going to find injected in my console. So let me just press on this button, and yeah, so we have the error. So to do repository not found, you need to call get.put to the repository or get.lazyput to the repository, and realize that abstract classes cannot be instantiated. So in this particular case, when you have an error like this, what you have to do, a simple fix, is to come to your bindings, so to do binding, and you have to type this, right, as to do repository. So what you could do is you just have to type whatever you are injecting instead of the implementation. So for now it is going to find the actual repository, but then we injected the implementation. So over here you just have to do repository like this, and that should fix the error. And also over here we have to type this out to do remote database like this, and that should fix the error. So hot restart, now everything should be fixed. So realize that as soon as we instantiate this, we have to do controller has been created, add to do use case has been created, to do repository has been created, to do remote database has been created, as well as to do controller has been initialized, right? And we can close it and open it again. So now I'm back to our to do controller. We just have this, and since we also swapped our our material app to a get material app, we can use GetX navigation and then GetX snack bars, right? So let's just try add new to do. So first to do, and the description is going to be this the description of my first to do. Now when we tap on add, and if everything is okay, we should have something in the console, right? And for now we don't have anything, so let's look at what is wrong. And if there's an error, we want to print the actual error itself. So probably I might not have internet connection on my emulator. That may also cause a problem. So let me just put some print statements here. And when there is a failure, I want to print the actual failure, that message. So let's try it again. And we didn't clear our text field. That's not a problem for now. So let's add, and then the adding to do method was called, but there is no results returned, right? So this could potentially be because my emulator doesn't have internet connection, as I can see over here, and we need internet connection in order to communicate with the with Firebase. So let's first check Firebase if we are having our data there, and we don't have our data here, right? So it means our data did not go through successfully. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart the emulator. Yeah, so I've restarted my emulator, and let's try adding to do it once more to see if it works. So I'm going to tap on my add to do, and let's edit this to work out again, and then the description is this is my description, right? Now when we tap on add, right, this will show us a snack bar which is success, to do added successfully. So when we check our database, we should have our to do added successfully. So when I come to my database and I refresh, realize that I have to do's collection created with a document ID which is 1, and then a description which says this is my description, the ID is 1, and the text is workout. So we are able to add our to do by calling our add to do use case. Now what I would want to do is I would want to generate a random ID for this to do. So let me just create a method within the controller to generate a random ID just anywhere, or you can create a method anywhere. So import this and then generate a random ID. So now each of our to-dos will have a random ID. Also, a small refraction I would want to do is I want to clear out the text in our controller when we are done adding the to do. So if it is successful, I want to clear out the text. So this will clear the form when we add the to do. So let's try another one. So realize that our to-do has been added successfully, and when we go to the database, realize that we have this random ID generated for our to-do. Then we have our awesome to-do text, and this should be the description over here, right? So this is how you can inject dependencies and call your use cases in your controllers, right? So if this video is complex because of the usage of GetX, don't worry. In the coming videos, I will look at how to do all these without any state management at all, right? So you just be using valueless nabble builders and then valuelessness for managing the states, because we are not actually doing any complex state management here. Also, with a dependency injection, you'll be using GetX package instead of GetX dependency injection system. So thank you very much for watching. If there is something you don't understand, you can comment or ask your question in the comment section. In the coming video, we'll be looking at how to display the added to-dos, which is going to be quite easier since we already have them added in our database, right? Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.